Hello and welcome to Dingoes at My Podcast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.
This week we are discussing the episode The Cautionary Tale of the Numero Cinco.
AKA one of Paul's favorite episodes of Angel.
Yes, it is, because it's a great episode. This episode originally aired November 5th, 2003, attracting approximately 4.02 million viewers. Alrighty, so let us start off with the number one film in America this week, Dave.
Again, nothing immediately jumps to mind around that time. Though, I wouldn't be surprised if it was still sticking up from last week with Scary Movie 3. Though, with it being the third, I'm not sure if it would have enough staying power to stick around for an additional week.
It is unfortunately still Scary Movie 3 with just over $20 million.
Yeah, nothing else interesting was on, supposedly.
It was about to get taken over by a few things, but that will
just wasn't the time.
Not quite yet. Something was coming that was going to eat its lunch, though. Moving on to the number one song in America this week, Dave. This should be pretty easy.
It's the same as from last week.
Still Baby Boy by Beyonce featuring Sean Paul.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly how long it's been, but I think we're in double digits now, isn't it? Or almost there?
I don't think we're yet, but it will hit double digits. Anyway, moving along to video games. As I spoiled last week, on November 5th, if you had a GameCube, Xbox, or Game Boy Advance, Lord of the Rings The Return of the King was released.
Yeah.
Which, hey, that's a big franchise right around now.
Indeed. It's Lord of the Rings with the fancy things and the swords and sorcery stuff.
Yes, and I remember those games actually being pretty good at the time, too.
Yeah. It's most of the stuff that was there.
November 6th, if you had a PS2, you could go pick up a little game called Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time.
Yes. The start of this particular franchise. Well, I say start, but it's kind of the case of taking something old and giving it the new spin.
Yeah, it's like a reboot of the franchise.
Indeed. And
what
a reboot it was.
I don't remember the last time there was an actual, prior to this, the last Prince of Persia game was
Oh, it was a thing. We have stories to supposedly tell about it.
So the last one, there was one in 99? I don't remember this at all.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those cases of them trying to either reboot it or bring some additional things to it, but it wasn't too much.
Oh, it was on Dreamcast and Windows. That's weird. Anyway, moving along. On November 10th, if you had a GameCube, Nintendo had a little game for you called Mario Party 5.
Yeah, because it is the funness.
Yeah, Mario Party has never been my party game franchise of choice, but I know people do quite enjoy them, so.
Yeah, it's true. It's also kind of a case of when you were kind of introduced to it, as well as the fact that depending on when you were introduced to it, if it was one of the first ones and all the suffering that came from those.
I think it was Mario Party 1 was the first one I played.
Oh, you poor soul. I'm so sorry.
I still have the stigmata to prove it. Anyway, moving on to, still on November 10th, actually. If you had a GameCube, PS2, or Xbox, you could pick up a little game called Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy.
Yes. Though, it's a case of one of those games that I've never specifically played, but I've heard stuff about it, and it sounds neat.
It got pretty decent reviews. I have never heard of this game at all, but I do like Egyptian stuff.
Indeed. It kind of delves into the more Egyptian the Egyptian sort of aesthetic of things. And it's one of those particular games where you technically play as two characters, but split gameplay between the two. One that has a bit more traditional platform stylings to it, and another one that's a little bit more puzzle oriented.
Nice. November 11th, if you had a PS2, you could pick up a little game called Beyond Good and Evil.
Ooh, this one. It is the neats.
You've played Beyond Good and Evil?
Indeed, though it's one of those particular ones that I've managed at least a good third of the way through, but kind of fallen a bit to the wayside within my collection. But especially with the crowd that it has behind it, it is very much loved, though it's one of those cases of it just never really sold well.
Yeah, and we're allegedly going to get a prequel and or sequel.
Whenever that happens.
But that might end up becoming like the new Duke Nukem Forever.
Hopefully not as bad, but still.
Well, that game, when was it announced? 2008.
Yeah. I think there was a bit of more news about it around in 2018, 19-ish maybe, but still, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been quite a while, and oh boy. Anyway, moving along. Also on November 11th, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up Looney Tunes Back in Action.
Yes, because that was a thing that happened.
That was a thing that happened. I guess that's the thing. Like, we don't get those kind of games anymore. Like, you don't get like a Looney Tunes game anymore, really.
Yeah, it's one of those particular tie-in sort of things that there's the licensing and whatnot for it, but it either seems like too much of a venture and loss for the companies to really push into, or there just hasn't been that much of a push in those sort of cases to really get something like that out there. Or it could be that there's an entire world of it that we haven't even discovered as of yet.
Yeah, I'm sure that they still release them, but like, if you look at like the PS2 kind of era, like those games got like they got like decent releases. Like it wasn't just something that would show up in a bargain bin. Like they actually were like promoted, and they were actually like some of them were actually pretty good.
It's fairly true, but it was also a different time where everyone and their grandma could go out and get the game out in development and get it advertised out to people without being a super big company.
This is true, and there were no microtransactions, and it was a better world because of it.
Yeah, it was so nice back then.
Wasn't it? You just bought a game and you could play the game, and they didn't constantly harass you to buy more things for the game.
Exactly, and the fact that they either made something interesting or had something additional to do it, they just either make another game or give you an additional thing to add on to it.
Yeah, like PC, you could get expansion packs, but they had to make the expansion pack good enough that you would pay $30 or $40 for it. Or whatever they were. I don't remember. Anyway, also on November 11th, if you had a PS2, Xbox, or GameCube, you could pick up Medal of Honor Rising Sun.
Yes, from that particular series.
Which is another one that we haven't heard from in probably close to a decade.
Yeah.
I feel like it's been a long time. And, yeah. Oh, wait, what? There was a Medal of Honor game in 2020?
I wouldn't be surprised, though it was 2020. There was kind of a lot of other things taking up the mind space at the time.
Oh, it was like an Oculus game. Okay, that doesn't count.
Yeah. Well, technically it does, but it's kind of the case of you need the specific equipment for it. But then that starts heading into that other argument of things, and we don't have time for that.
Well, also, it requires me to have a Facebook account, and I don't. No, that's not going to happen. Anyway,
Yeah, those cases.
moving along to still on November 11th, if you had a GameCube, you could pick up a game called Muppets Party Cruise.
Again, not too surprising. One of those particular things that I had never gotten into, but again, not too surprising.
I don't remember this game being a thing, but I part of me almost wants to find a copy and play it just because, like, it can't be good.
It was also a thing of the times, and quite honestly, can you really be that upset with the Muppets? Even if they do release a bad game?
No, it's the Muppets. I love the Muppets. I mean, everybody should love the Muppets.
Most indeed.
But yeah, okay. Moving on, still on November 11th, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up a little game, and I'm probably going to butcher pronouncing this. Onimusha Tactics.
Yes. So it's still kind of a case of I recognize the name, but I have no idea the gameplay.
Okay, it's a spin-off of the Onimusha series, apparently, but I've never played any of those games, so I could not tell you anything about them.
Hmm.
Moving along, still on November 11th, because this was a fucking massive day. If you had a PS2, you could pick up Ratchet and Clank Going Commando.
Yes, because that was the series that actually lasted decently throughout time.
Yeah, and it's still sort of around. Actually, no, they had a game in like 2021, Rift Apart.
Yep, just a marvelous case of that series, though. It's definitely changed, but no matter what, it sticks to its main principle. It gives you a whole bunch of guns, and you can blast the shit out of just about anything.
Okay, I'm gonna say this, and I'll probably get hate for it, but it's probably my favorite like looter shooter franchise.
No, it's understandable.
Just because it's so dumb and I love it. And they're
Well, of course
fun.
it's dumb. It has a villain that if he gets too upset, he starts spouting out random space dramas.
Oh, it's so good. Also, November 11th, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up SSX3,
Yes,
which,
I might be getting it confused with a thing, but yes, that was a thing.
yeah. November 11th, also, if you were a PC gamer, GameCube, PS2, or Xbox, you could pick up The Hobbit, which, I mean, I guess that was the time to release that game.
You know, Lord of the Rings, Hobbits related to it.
It is indeed. Also on November 11th, if you were a PC gamer, you could pick up. Oh. Oh. You could pick up a little game called Uru Ages Beyond Mist.
Suppose it yay?
Are you familiar with the Mist games at all?
Vaguely. Like the title is coming to mind, but I know absolutely nothing of the series.
Okay. Here's the thing. Mist was great when it came out in 93. I don't know how well it holds up in 2023.
For the obvious reason of it's fairly old and it has some questionable things discussed about inside of it, or just that the graphics are kind of.
Um, I don't know if the gameplay mechanics would work 30 years later as well. Like, I think that it might be kind of weird to play. And obviously, graphically, it's not going to look as good as a modern game. They did do like a remake of it, I think, like no, a couple of years ago. But yeah, Myst was a good game. Anyway, moving on to our final game, also on November 11th. If you were a PC, PS2, or Xbox gamer, you could pick up a little game called Legacy of Kain: Defiance.
Hold on a second. That's ringing a bell, but it's somewhat sticking in my head. Duh.
Legacy of Kain: Defiance. Yes. If I want to say that this game was notorious because it was supposed to get a sequel and it ended on a cliffhanger, and it never got resolved. But I might be thinking of the wrong game.
Oh no, you're right. Because surprisingly enough, this is like one of the ridiculously huge big series that's fairly interesting with how much stuff they decide to put in it, but just with how long it's been and that no company wants to bother putting any sort of effort into actually releasing it, it's just kind of sat on that cliffhanger for years.
Yeah, it's
And this
also
was my introduction to the series.
well, it was also a series that Amy Hennig, who would go on to write the Uncharted games, or well, most of them, worked on as well. So
Understandable. A couple things from there.
oh,
So, I'm not sure how much you would find it interesting because it has its own kind of interesting lore on what vampires can do.
um, so Legacy of Kain is one of those things that every time I hear about it, I'm like, that sounds really interesting, and then I'm always like, but like, um, there's like 5 games, and the first one's from '96, and it kind of looks like garbage, and
Yeah, it wasn't until like maybe the third one that I actually started to get more into a traditional third person playing style. And even then, it was fairly archaic and on the PlayStation.
Yeah, it's one of those games that I'm like, I would be interested in playing it, but I would hope that, like, maybe if they got remastered or something. Because, yeah.
Which, of
Anyway.
course, would be interesting, but also kind of a case of they'd have to start from the ground up if they wanted to.
Actually, like, the graphics for Soul Reaver don't look terrible, and that's, like, the second one. So,
Hmm.
I'd be up to giving it a try if I could get a copy of it. Anyway, that is video games for this week. Let us get into the episode, which, I'll be honest, not a lot happens in this episode, but it's great.
Duly noted, though there's one thing that's scratching at the back of my head.
Go ahead.
Just with all the couple particular things that came up video game wise, there seems to be a title that was missing from the list, but maybe it just wasn't released this week.
Oh, what game are you thinking
All
of?
the particular titles that was kind of mentioned, there's one that's blazing to the front of my brain. It's like, this was around the time this game released. He needs to mention about it. And it's like, is it though?
What game are you thinking?
I'm thinking one of the Mario Karts on the GameCube. I believe it was Double Dash.
Sir, you are jumping a week ahead.
Ah, okay.
Because
Or maybe it might have been a case that it was maybe first released in Japan and then finally got over to the States around that time.
in about a week, Nintendo is going to just decide that they own the video game market again.
Oh, yes, in one of those marvelous cases.
Where they're just going to go like, here's 3 games we win. Actually, I think technically one of them isn't theirs, but it's just on their platform.
Eh,
But anyway, yes, we will get to that next week. Don't worry.
duly noted.
Okay. It's time to talk about some luchadors fighting demons.
Which, on the one hand, there was some of that, but it's also mildly surprising that there wasn't quite enough of it.
Alrighty. So, the episode takes place mostly on the Mexican Day of the Dead. Angel has a run-in with a masked man at with a masked Wolfram Heart employee who's connected to an Aztec warrior demon named Quetzalcoatl, who preys on the hearts of heroes. This leads Angel to wrestle with some personal issues. When he learns about Los Hermanos Numeros, a family of 5 Mexican wrestlers who helped the helpless until one day they were slain by Quetzalcoatl, except for the 5th brother. Angel helps the last member, Numero Cinco, to discover the hero inside, which he lost when his family was killed. Meanwhile, Spike researches the Shanshu prophecy, which he heard Angel saying he doesn't believe is real. So, that's really about all that happens in this episode. They fight the demon. Numero Cinco dies, we think, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Not a lot happens in this, but it's fun, damn it.
Yeah, it's understandable. Kind of runs through the particular story of his life with his brothers before they got killed and their story, which kind of had a ridiculously silly mix of a Power Rangers episode and mild, jokey sort of episode of Buffy and or Angel.
Okay, so we see a flashback to like him and his brothers having a match. We assume it is in Mexico, and this, of course, this is the first thing I noticed: is the ring they're in is friggin' tiny.
Yeah.
Like it can't be more than 12 feet.
Budget to actually get a decent sized ring.
How hard is it to just get a proper sized ring, guys?
I don't know. We might have to look into it.
I feel like I could get a proper ring within a few days. Anyway, what do you think of this episode, Dave? Because I quite enjoyed it because obviously it involves Lucha Libre.
So, on the one hand, this episode doesn't really have a whole bunch of stuff to it. Just kind of the issue of kind of Spike and Angel's thought of, why the heck am I here? What's really kind of going on with stuff? And then the Lucha Libre stuff, Mexican Day of the Dead, and all the other aesthetics of the episode. Just interesting enough. And it's not even really that bad about it in that sort of case. It doesn't really joke too much about it. It's good that it kind of has that inclusion to it because, especially around that time, I can't think of much anything else that would really kind of focus on stuff like that.
Yeah, I enjoy that they bring the lucha libre into it, but like, I mean, and I know I'm gonna get a bunch of people pissed off, but like, especially to like somebody who doesn't speak Spanish, it's hard to take lucha libre terribly seriously.
Yeah,
Because,
especially with the one particular thing they decide to do with it.
but like, I mean, you're not super familiar with lucha, obviously, but like, I it's hard to take it seriously because they're all in like super bright. Like, I love it because it's like they're all in like super bright costumes and it's like super fast paced and it's really cool, but like, it is kind of wacky.
It's the aesthetic of the style
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
if it's something that it definitely intrigues you, it's definitely going to be interesting. But definitely with the person first taking their first look at it, is definitely kind of raise the eyebrow.
Yeah, I mean, they have some great characters.
Indeed, it was at least a good episode for what it decided to sort of do, though. I'm not too surprised with someone saying that this would just be a filler episode.
Oh yeah,
Like, it's
it
very
absolutely
much
is.
just kind of the case of Angel and Spike kind of getting some thoughts on the prophecy and what they're going to do, and that Wolfram and Hart has a little amulet thing that it had to protect every 50 years whether he decides to come back.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's basically just Angel going to help this luchador to like restore his honor.
Yeah.
It's definitely not like a super crucial episode. You could easily skip it, but it is fun.
Indeed, and you get to see Angel get thrown through a window from an old luchador gentleman.
Yes. Yes, he
Spike
does.
definitely enjoyed it.
It was Spike was very happy about this. Angel attacked that old man.
Yes, just twisting the story to his needs.
Spike. Anyway, there's not really a lot to talk about this episode because, like, it's not super important, but it is fun, I think. So, okay, so a couple of little trivia notes about this episode because I happen to have them. The episode was originally titled Night of the Luchadors, which I think is a better title, personally.
But then also that it may cause maybe issues? I'm not too sure, but yeah.
I can't imagine it would, but oh well. What else? Oh, we do get a Wilhelm scream in this episode, which makes me very happy.
Oh man, I think I missed it. I can't recall hearing that.
Yeah, when Carlos, the plumber dude, is attacked at the beginning of the episode, there's a Wilhelm scream.
Oh, right at the start.
Yeah.
And that was why.
Yes. Okay, so the lawyer who approached Numero Cinco in that flashback was what's his name? Holland Mathers, the guy who was previously at Wolfram and Hart but was, dead. So there's a little tie into some continuity stuff there.
Neat.
And originally, the writer-director of this episode wanted this to be an X-Files episode. I guess he had pitched the basic idea as like an X-Files script, and then got hired at Angel, and they were like, "Well, let's do that." Yes. So let us move on to some international titles. So there's a bunch of them that are either just the cautionary tale of Numero Cinco or like Day of the Dead or something like that. So we're going to just omit those. So in French, it translates as Heart of a Hero. In Hungarian, The Secret of the Five. In Italian, The Sad Story of Numero Cinco. In Russian, The Cautionary Tale of the Magnificent Five. And my favorite, in Latin American Spanish, The Careful Adventure of the Numero Cinco.
Do they not have an appropriate word for cautionary?
I don't know, but it's fantastic. I think it's a matter of like I think it's one of those things where like you translate it from English to Spanish and then back and things get fucked up.
Oh yes, one of those marvelous cases.
Yeah, where like that just happens sometimes with languages cuz like nothing translates perfectly.
So true.
Alrighty. So if there's nothing else about this episode, next week we'll be discussing the episode Lineage. So, the offices of Wolfram and Hart are under attack by cyborg assassins who are seeking a magical device that will give them control over Angel. Meanwhile, Wesley is surprised by the unannounced arrival of his estranged father, who has come to evaluate Wesley for possible reacceptance to the Watchers Council.
Okay, for the second thing, that's somewhat interesting, but for the first thing, you kind of said, what?
Yes, there's going to be cyborg assassins.
Which, on the one hand, I'm not too surprised for, but where the flip did this come from? Did this come from the same organization that was within Buffy that made that one other cyborg gentleman?
I was just gonna say, it's not the first time we've ever had cyborgs in this universe.
Very much indeed, but still, it was loony then, and it's even loonier now.
But to answer your question, I don't believe this is related to the Initiative because I believe that they are basically all dead.
Yeah, with what happened when they activated the guy and everything else.
Yes, Adam. Yes. No. If memory serves, this has nothing to do with the Initiative. Although I wish it did, because that would be a hell of a callback. Okay. So, if there's nothing else to add, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.